There are places that attract opportunity, cities filled with glass towers, regions known for innovation, neighborhoods where businesses compete for space. And then, there are places people avoid, places that carry a reputation. This was one of them. For years, it had been known as unreliable, too far from major cities, too disconnected from infrastructure, too risky for serious investment. On paper, it wasn't completely empty. There were buildings, old industrial sites, unused land, a few scattered businesses trying to survive. But something was missing. Trust. No major company wanted to build here. No investors wanted to take the risk. No one believed this place could become anything important. And over time, that belief became reality. Because when people stopped believing in a place, they stopped building in it. Years passed. Opportunities moved elsewhere. Nearby regions grew. Modern industries expanded. But this place stayed behind. Frozen, not by weather, but by perception. People described it in simple terms. Nothing happens there. It became the kind of place you passed through, not the kind of place you stopped in. But what most people didn't see was what had been left behind. Because this place had once been something different. Decades earlier, it had been an industrial zone. Factories operated here. Warehouses stored goods moving between regions. Transport routes connected it to nearby cities. For a time, it worked. But as industries changed, those systems collapsed. Factories shut down. Supply chains shifted. And slowly, the entire area was abandoned by the industries that built it. What remained was something unusual. Not a completely empty place, but an underused one. Land that was already developed. Infrastructure that still existed. Buildings that were no longer being used. And most importantly, space. A lot of space. But in modern business, space alone isn't enough. What matters is momentum. And this place had none. Until someone started looking at it differently. His name was Adrian Wolf. Adrian Wolf was 37 years old, a systems architect who had spent years working with high-scale digital infrastructure, cloud systems, distributed computing, network design, the kind of work that supported modern technology companies behind the scenes. He didn't build apps. He built the systems that allowed them to exist. And over time, he noticed something that most people ignored. Technology wasn't just growing. It was spreading. For years, tech companies had concentrated themselves in major cities. Places like Silicon Valley. Large urban centers with talent, funding, and infrastructure. But those places were becoming expensive. Extremely expensive. Land costs were rising. Operating costs were increasing. Competition for resources was intense. And for companies building large-scale infrastructure, that created a problem. Because not everything in technology needs to be in a city. Data doesn't care about location. Servers don't need skyline views. Infrastructure doesn't need expensive real estate. It needs efficiency. Adrian began studying a different kind of model. Decentralization. Instead of building everything in one place, what if companies spread their infrastructure across multiple regions? Cheaper regions. Available regions. Ignored regions. Places like this one. At first, the idea didn't seem revolutionary. But when Adrian started analyzing the numbers, it became something else. A massive opportunity. Land costs here were a fraction of what companies paid in cities. Existing infrastructure could be upgraded instead of built from scratch. And most importantly, there was no competition, no bidding wars, no crowded market, just availability. The kind of availability companies rarely find. Adrian visited the place for the first time on a quiet afternoon. What he saw matched its reputation. Empty industrial buildings, wide open land, minimal activity. But instead of seeing a failed region, he saw a blank canvas. He walked through an abandoned warehouse, large enough to hold entire server systems, strong enough to support heavy infrastructure, already connected to basic utilities. He stepped outside and looked across the area. Multiple sites like this, unused, waiting, and slowly, a realization formed. This place wasn't behind. It was early, because in a world where everything is overcrowded, the next opportunity often exists where nothing is happening yet. Adrian didn't see a problem. He saw timing. But seeing an opportunity is one thing. Proving it is something else entirely. Because what Adrian Wolf was about to suggest went against everything the industry believed, that you didn't need a famous location to build something powerful. And if he was wrong, this place would remain exactly what it had always been. Ignored. When Adrian Wolf began reaching out to companies, he didn't start with a pitch. He started with a problem. Because every fast-growing tech company was dealing with the same pressure. Scale, more users, more data, more demand, and behind all of it, infrastructure. Servers needed space, systems needed stability, and costs were rising faster than most companies expected. For years, the solution had been simple. Build in major tech hubs. Stay close to talent. Stay close to investors. Stay close to the ecosystem. But that solution was starting to break. Because the very places that made growth possible were now making it expensive. Leases were increasing. Energy costs were rising. Competition for space was intense. And for companies trying to expand quickly, that created a bottleneck. Adrian understood something critical. The future of technology wasn't just about innovation. It was about efficiency. And efficiency didn't require a famous location. It required the right conditions. So instead of selling an idea, he started asking a question. What if your infrastructure didn't need to be here? At first, most companies didn't take it seriously. The response was predictable. Why would we move to a place no one trusts? It was the same barrier again. Reputation. Because in business, perception often matters more than reality. Adrian knew he couldn't change perception with words. He needed proof. So he changed his strategy. Instead of targeting large corporations, he focused on smaller, aggressive companies. Startups that were growing too fast. Companies that needed infrastructure immediately, but couldn't afford traditional options. These companies weren't looking for safety. They were looking for advantage. And that's where Adrian found his first opening. One company in particular stood out. A cloud-based platform handling rapidly increasing data traffic. Their systems were struggling to keep up. They needed expansion. Fast. But every option they explored came with the same problem. Cost. That's when Adrian presented something different. Not a city, not a brand, not a reputation, just numbers. Lower land cost, lower operating cost, expandable infrastructure, minimal competition, and a location that allowed them to scale without limits. At first, the company hesitated. Moving infrastructure was risky. Building in an unproven location was even riskier. But Adrian offered something that changed the conversation. A pilot. Start small. One facility. Limited investment. Test the model. If it failed, they could walk away. If it worked, they would have an advantage no one else had. The company agreed to visit. When they arrived, the first reaction was exactly what Adrian expected. Doubt. The area didn't look like a tech hub. There were no glass towers. No startup offices. No signs of innovation. Just empty buildings and quiet roads. But Adrian didn't show them what it was. He showed them what it could become. He walked them through the sites. Large warehouses that could be converted, land that could support expansion, infrastructure that could be upgraded. And then, he showed them the numbers again. This time, standing inside the space where it could actually happen. And something shifted. For the first time, they weren't looking at the place. They were looking at the opportunity. A few weeks later, the decision came. They would build. Not big. Not yet. But enough to test the idea. Construction started quietly. No major announcements. No headlines. Just activity. Workers arriving. Equipment being delivered. Old buildings being transformed. For the first time in years, something was being built. At first, the local reaction was cautious. People had seen projects come and go before. There was no guarantee this would be different. But slowly, signs began to appear. More vehicles. More movement. More light at night. And then, the facility went live. Inside, servers began running. Systems activated. Data started moving through the network. And what Adrian had predicted began to happen. Lower operating costs. Stable performance. Scalable infrastructure. The model worked. And in business, one thing always follows success. Attention. The same companies that had ignored the idea started asking questions. How efficient was it? What were the costs? Could it scale? Adrian now had something he didn't have before. Proof. And proof changes everything. Because once one company takes the risk, others don't see risk anymore. They see opportunity. The second company arrived faster. Then the third. And with each new arrival, the perception of the place began to shift. Not completely. Not yet. But enough to start something. Because what was once ignored was now being noticed. And what happens next would turn that attention into something much bigger. Something that would change not just the place, but the way people thought about it. Forever. The third company didn't arrive with hesitation. It arrived with urgency. By the time they made their decision, something had already changed. Not publicly, not in headlines. But inside the industry, the conversation was different. There was a place, an unexpected place, where infrastructure costs were lower, where expansion was easier, where early companies were already seeing results, and more importantly, where there was still space, a rare advantage in an industry that was quickly running out of it. What Adrian Wolf had started as an experiment was becoming a signal. The third facility was larger, more servers, more systems, more investment. And this time, it didn't feel like a test. It felt like commitment. Construction moved faster. Processes were refined. Designs improved based on the first two builds. The area that once stood empty now had momentum. And momentum is something you can't ignore for long. Because once movement begins, it attracts more of itself. Within months, more companies began visiting. Some quietly, some openly. Executives walking through the same buildings that had once been dismissed, now asking different questions. Not why here, but how soon can we start? That shift changed everything. Because reputation doesn't change gradually. It flips, slowly at first, then all at once. And this place was flipping. By the fourth year, the transformation was visible, not just in infrastructure, but in behavior. Construction permits increased. Land acquisitions accelerated. The local government, once focused on maintaining decline, now focused on managing growth. Roads were expanded. Energy systems upgraded. High-speed connectivity installed across the region. Fiber lines stretched across land that had once been ignored. The foundation of a tech hub was being built. And with that foundation came something even more powerful. Confidence. Because once companies believe a place works, they stop questioning it. They start competing for it. And that's exactly what happened. Land prices began to rise. Not dramatically at first, but steadily. Early investors who had taken the risk now held something valuable. The same land no one wanted was now being negotiated over. Because the one thing that had once defined the place, its emptiness, was now its greatest strength. There was still room to grow. And growth in technology doesn't happen slowly. It compounds. By the fifth year, the numbers told the full story. Multiple companies operating simultaneously. Thousands of servers running day and night. Data moving through systems that powered platforms across the world. And money flowing in continuously. Not from one source, but from many. Infrastructure investment. Operational spending. Expansion capital. Support services. And with that money came people. At first, it was small. Engineers relocating for work. Technicians moving in for new roles. But then it accelerated. Young professionals looking for opportunity. Specialists drawn by growing demand. Even entrepreneurs seeing something new. A market forming. Because where infrastructure grows, businesses follow. Housing developments began appearing. New buildings rising where empty land once stood. Old structures renovated. Entire neighborhoods coming back to life. The silence that once defined the place was gone, replaced by something constant. Movement, activity, noise. The kind of noise that signals growth. Inside the facilities, machines ran without pause. Outside, the environment changed. Shops reopened. Restaurants expanded. New services appeared. And the most surprising shift of all, people who once avoided the place were now choosing it. Because reputation had changed. Not through marketing, not through promotion, but through results. The place no one trusted had become a place that worked. And in business, that's all that matters. Adrian Wolf never described himself as someone who built a tech hub. He described himself as someone who noticed something others ignored. The value wasn't created. It was already there. It just wasn't being used. The land, the infrastructure, the lack of competition, the absence of noise, all the things that once made the place undesirable were the same things that made it powerful. Because in a world where everything is crowded, the next opportunity often exists where nothing is happening yet. By the 7th year, the transformation was undeniable. The region that had once been overlooked was now one of the fastest growing technology infrastructure zones in the area. Not because it followed the traditional path, but because it ignored it. No famous location, no startup culture, no hype, just execution and efficiency and scale. Today, if you visit the place, it doesn't look the way it once did. The emptiness is gone. In its place, structure, purpose, momentum, large facilities stretching across land that once stood unused, roads filled with movement, Buildings filled with systems that never stop running. And people, everywhere, working, building, expanding. The place didn't change because people believed in it. People started believing in it because it changed. And that's the difference. Because sometimes, the most powerful transformation doesn't come from attention. It comes from action. And by the time the world notices, it's already too late to ignore it.